This is the Tapped In Podcast, the podcast for beverage distributors that want to empower their sales team to drive business results. Listen up and welcome back to another episode of the Tapped In Sales. I'm your host, Bud. I'm here with co-host Mikey, and we have a new member here today, a new participant interviewee, Kary Shumway.
Hello, gentlemen. It's wonderful to be here with you today.
Well, thanks, Kary, for coming. Mike, my man, you doing good?
Doing good, man. Yeah, hanging in there. Excited to have Kary on the show today and learn a little bit more about what he does.
We've got you all flustered already with too much of an outline. Too much details. Not enough rough.
Yeah. What the listeners probably don't know is that usually we just shoot from the hip. We really don't have a whole lot of an outline or a direction where we're going to go when we record these things. We just start talking and go there. So now today we have a little bit of an outline to keep us on track, and that's throwing the.
We have to be organized. We have to look like we're organized. Yes. So we're here with Kary Shumway, your financial guru for beer distributors. Kary, tell the crew a little bit about yourself.
Yes, sir. So I started in the beer business about 25 years ago. I was fortunate enough, I was working at a CPA firm at the time, and we'd go in and do taxes and reviews and audits and whatnot, and it was fine. And we'd go to different clients, and the joke was you'd go into the client, you'd be doing the work, they'd come in and they'd look at you and go, "Hey, how you doing? Good. When are you leaving?" And it was always like, "Get out of here." They just get my tax return done and get out of here. And it was funny and this and that. But one of our clients was the local beer distributor. And as it happened, their CFO was retiring after 47 years. And they asked me if I would be interested. And it took about, a nanosecond. I'm like, absolutely. So from that point on, it was really, I knew finance, I knew accounting, I was a CPA, I knew all the nuts and bolts, but I didn't really know the beer industry. So it was a process of, and frankly, there really wasn't anyone else in the company that understood the finances, and they knew that, and that's why they were bringing somebody in. So my job over the next 15, 20 years was get myself educated, and then educate the leadership team, our management team, and ultimately our staff. So one of the things we did was a financial literacy training program, fancy way of saying like just teaching people how the numbers work, what numbers are important, what levers to pull, how their jobs really kind of related to the financial outcomes of the business. Because I'd be talking to drivers and they're like, "This has nothing to do with me. I deliver beer and I come back and I got nothing to do with the financials." But over time we'd say, "Well, you have a lot to do with the financials, and here's how." And we just sort of draw a line between the actions and decisions we're all making and how that impacts the financial statements. So it was a long process. So what I did while I was educating myself, I was sort of documenting stuff so I could show others. And that evolved into, wow, and I'd talk to other beer wholesalers at conferences. They're like, "Oh, I could actually use that." So we would do sales training programs, finance for non-financial sales managers as an example. Because that seemed to be like a sweet spot. Like, wow, the sales folks kind of could use this. And then it was general managers, and then it was it just kind of evolved to really every position within the company. So I would just write articles, eventually created these courses because it was easier for me to record myself talking about a certain thing and then share it. And then we've evolved into webinars and podcasts and all the fun things. So it's been a great ride. I've really enjoyed it. From the beginning, I said, I love beer. I love numbers. I've been able to combine them, and I feel like Lou Gehrig. I'm the luckiest man to be able to do it. So it's awesome.
So when you were doing those financial literacy trainings at your wholesaler, when you were working there, was that classroom setting that you put together and organized, and that they had to show up and mandatory training and all that?
It was, yeah. And, if I were to do it again, I might think about doing it differently because, you want to meet people where they are, and not everybody likes a classroom, right? So it probably would have been better to literally go out in a truck with someone and talk about, or run a sales route and talk about. But no, the way we did it was very classroom oriented. So we would pull people in, and I'd have a whole curriculum. And I made a lot of mistakes, because I was so enthusiastic about this. And few people shared my enthusiasm. I'll say it that way. They're like, I don't want to know. I want to just do my job. I want you to leave me alone. I want to do my job and go home. Now, not everybody, but that was the kind of the majority. Like, why are you making me learn this stuff? I don't want to. But over time, you build a rapport with people and you try to relate like me. And I get it, it's hard. And we, again, try to meet them where they are and make this information sort of relevant to what they already knew. So we would talk about, all right, you got a car payment, you got a mortgage, that's kind of like debt on the books, and here's how debt works. But we would really start very granular with, what is it that you do? And let's talk about how that translates into numbers on the financials. So as a driver, the basic stuff would be, you run a route every day. You're driving a certain number of miles. You've got a certain amount of gas that you're burning. Fuel costs X. And here's sort of, let's build up you're like a little income statement driving around there. You're delivering beer, so you got sales. You've got the cost of sales, the cost of that beer that's there. Then you just go right on down the list. And eventually it would be like, all right, I get it. Now, it was interesting too, is we had a number of folks who used to run like Frito-Lay or Chip Roots, so they'd understand this. They'd be right dead on. No, I totally get it. And then they became little ambassadors. Like, they would take the other guys aside because they're more likely to listen to your peers than to listen to me. Okay, whatever. He's just an egghead talking about, CPA stuff. But it was more relevant when we could kind of share these principles and you could get a lot of peer-to-peer stuff.
So it's funny that you talk about like your own little income statement, because we do the same thing at Atlas, and then we do the same thing with VXP all the time too, of like, hey, we got your income, that's your sales, and then you've got your W-2 income, that's your personal stuff, and then you've got your building or your debt payments, and that's like a mortgage and your car payments, and then you've got all your expenses of living, and that's like all the wages and the benefits and the entitlements that we pay. And then what's left over is your net income at the company, or for you, it's savings on your personal. And we operate our lives like little businesses. We just use different terms and, more nerd terms or professional terms instead of, people terms, where the personal finance side has come together. So that's fun. It's funny to hear. It is one of the reasons why I love working with you too, because we think about this world very similarly. We try to bring very similar values to our clients. So on that vein, give the crew listening a quick overview of, because you're away working from the wholesaler specifically, and we're working with many wholesalers now and a consultant and educator. How do clients typically engage with you? How do people in the industry typically engage with you?
Yeah, there's really two ways that I work with folks. One is, and where I encourage people to start, is to join our Beer Business Finance Association. And really, this is just a network of beer wholesaler owners, managers, leadership, financial or non-financial, mostly non-financial. And we come together on a regular basis, and I will facilitate the meeting where we're talking about a specific topic. So our most recent topic is, Bud, you had joined us, and I'm very grateful that you did. We talked about compensation planning, incentive structures, and how to align your pay with top-level goals. Very hot topic, and we're definitely going to do a round two because there's a lot of great discussion. So we kind of go through the core principles of, all right, here's kind of some things to think about, in terms of designing your compensation plan. Here's how incentives can work best or work not so well. And then here's how we align that compensation with your top-level goals. So step one is we encourage people to join the membership, the association, come to the meeting, see if it's valuable for you. Because, the only reason I'm doing this is like, I want people to be able to come to these meetings, get this content, and be able to implement something right away in their business and make a difference, right? So this isn't just like concepts and abstract. No, this is like practical. You show me, oh, interesting. Or you learn that from another beer wholesaler. Oh, I like that. And then you go do it. So we're here to make a difference. So that's really one. Check out the association. Number two is I do one-on-one work. So folks are like, that's great. I like the content there. However, I've got some specific problems that, I don't really want to share with the group. I just want to kind of get your eyeballs on it. So I do a lot of financial reviews. What tends to, it's a lot of fundamental stuff. We need a financial plan, a budget. Do we have one? Yeah, but we don't really use it. All right, let's go back to that, dial it in. And then we look at kind of some financial ratios and metrics. How are you doing relative to where you want to be? And we usually start with my opinion, the most important is you really got to understand your cash flow, your net operating income, your EBITDA, your earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And from there, we can go bananas, but those are really the most important. So 2 ways: join the association, check it out, or we can work one-on-one together on your project.
Nice. So now that you're kind of out of the 4 walls of the one distributor and you're in multiple distributors, working with different people across the country, what do you see what are the most common financial challenges that are facing distributors today?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge I'm seeing is really just getting their hands around the numbers of their business. Like, how are we doing? How could we do better? How do we compare to other wholesalers? Where are we off the mark? Where are we on the mark? Just, I think, a general sense of, vague. We don't always feel like we're in control of the numbers. We feel like the opposite is true. Sometimes the numbers are in control of us. And I totally get that, because sales, we're at the whims of the market. Cost of sales the same. Expenses are going up everywhere. And, you've got payroll, you've got occupancy, you've got everything is just kind of, fuel is coming at you. So it can feel overwhelming. So the biggest challenge I hear is like, how do we get our arms around this? How do we kind of create a system so that we know where should we be and where are we and how are we tracking towards those goals? Like, what does success look like? And how do we kind of quantify that, simplify that, and then be able to kind of push that down through the organization so everybody can understand, what levers we need to pull to get where we want to get to.
Talking about benchmarking and KPIs, what financial metrics should distributors be tracking on a daily basis or regularly, whether it be monthly or annually? What metrics should they really be paying close attention to?
I think it starts with, it's interesting because when I work with folks or just interact with other folks in the beer industry, it's the most common questions, like what should I be looking at? What are the most important numbers? And my answer is rather boring and unsatisfactory, but it really is. It's just in 2 words, it's cash flow. And we kind of joked, I made these, those little rubber bracelets, and it says cash flow first. So it's beer business finance, cash flow first. And a lot of people do resonate with, like, yeah, no, that's right. Because we kind of lose sight of the most important thing, because there's lots of other shiny objects. Well, I want to measure, gross profit per stop. Great. I mean, that's a great measurement. But if your operating expenses are out of control and you're not really making any money and cash flow stinks because, we have so much inventory and we're not collecting our receivables, and, kind of not going to get where you want to go. So number one, and I can't say it enough, is you got to understand the cash flow of your business. So what we do is we then say, oh, well, what does that mean? All right, I get it. I mean, money's coming in, money's going out. What are you talking about? What do I need to measure? So we basically have the 5 key drivers of cash flow that we want to look at. And that's, measuring your inventory. It's a huge number, consumes a lot of cash. So we look at sort of a days on hand calculation or inventory turnover. Accounts receivable, not for all wholesalers, really depends on the credit in your state. But that can get out of control fast. You have hundreds or thousands of retailers, they don't always pay on time. They may go out of business, this and that. Capital expenditures is a big one too. Like, how we got to buy new trucks or expand the warehouse. How are we paying for that? Debt service and loan financing is a big one as well. Like, what we tend to do when we're doing these initial cash flow analysis is we take the income statement. How's your net operating income looking compared to your debt service coverage? And how well are you covering it? Where do you need to be? And then it's just good old fashioned net operating income. So we throw all these things into the mix. We create a dashboard that can kind of simplify it. And then you've got a better sense as to what cash flow really means and what levers we need to pull in order to improve it. So that's answer number one. Answer number two is there's, I could give you 30 other numbers. When we do these association meetings for beer business finance, we crowdsource what all the KPIs people are tracking, what they think are most important. And so we've aggregated this big old list. And a lot of it is stuff you've probably seen before. It's like obviously sales growth, or what's my, gross profit percentage, or what do the trends look like on that, or what's my payroll as a percentage of sales, and on and on and on. So there's many, many number of things that we like to track. But I think if you don't start with what's most important, kind of the rest of it doesn't matter as much. So cash flow for sure, net operating income and EBITDA are really the foundations to track.
When you build all these things together, like what you do with clients, is we ran a sheet very similar to what you're talking about doing, taking our gross receipts, our gross profit, our costs, bringing it down and intertwine. Because the cash flow analysis is, to me, is really intertwining a balance sheet transaction, what's happening off the income statement, and what's happening on the income statement to show you what you got left in cash at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So you're really trying to combine all three operations or financial operations together in one piece. And with the shiny objects, and I always pick on our team because they were our team, so I get to do that. We would get distracted by shiny objects too, but it came back to the shiny objects build up to the cash flow analysis and cash flow statement and what that looks like from an operating and how you can strategize, because you do have a limited number of resources in cash at the end of the day. And no matter what the shiny object is telling us, we could have an incredible shiny object KPI and have an awful cash flow statement. And I'd rather have it in reverse. I'd rather have a clean cash flow statement, like everything on the KPIs be red, than the other way around. But I'm a wild child related to that. So we followed the same method. We didn't work together. I don't know how many years have you been doing beer business finance now, Kary?
It's been probably 6 or 7 years, something like that.
Okay, yeah. So like as we were walking through this on our own, I was left to my own devices with our outside accounts. We didn't have Kary to help with, but I'm sure that would have fast tracked our process in a big way, for sure. So you've got this other top 12 challenges for beer distributors, which I love this as well. The other piece that really poke out to me is right now on we talked about it briefly, but like cost management and how costs are rising and how many cost cutting efforts wholesalers have taken over the last decade, or longer. Yeah. What other cost cutting metrics or actually not metrics, but activities are you seeing wholesalers that deploy right now from the cost side of the business?
I missed that last. What am I saying? They're avoiding, or what are they doing?
What are you seeing they're deploying? Like, what are they doing?
Deploying.
What are they focusing on from a cost cutting side right now?
Gotcha. Yeah, I think so. There's this sort of mindset with costs that I think we need to address first, which is, and I learned this from a book, which I'll share in a moment. I talk about it all the time, and I'll mention it, and people are like, got that book again. But the book is called Double Your Profits in 6 Months or Less by Bob Pfeiffer, F-I-F-E-R. And the title's kind of hokey in the book itself, but I've found this very valuable. So one of the things that I've sort of borrowed from the book and tried to internalize and share is that when we're approaching cost cutting, we need to sort of shift the paradigm, because we often think, well, the cost is there, I need to justify getting rid of it, right? So we look at the P&L, we go through the operating expenses, we're like, maybe I could cut this, maybe I can't cut that because this will happen, or at least downstream. And he's just shifted around. He goes, no, the cost needs to justify its existence, not the other way around. You don't need to justify getting rid of it. You're going to get rid of it in your head anyway, and then you're going to justify whether, it deserves to stay. So it really is sort of flipping the script on how you approach this process. So that's one. Get your mind right around these costs. Don't just, there's no, you guys talk a lot about entitlements in other ways. There's no entitlement for that cost to be there. So start with, that thing needs to justify its existence or it's gone. That's one. The other mindset is, and this was from Carlos Brito back in the day from Anheuser-Busch, he would say, really look at, does this cost that you're spending, does the customer know of it? Does it make a difference to the customer? Like if you got rid of that cost, would the customer have any idea? Like does your product suffer? Does your service suffer? Or is this kind of like one of those costs that, it's convenient for us to, because so many of the costs are. So these are sort of focusing questions. And then the other sort of focusing question might be, does this make us a better business? Maybe better business means we're training our employees, we're improving safety, culture, environment, what have you. So those are just kind of top level things. Now more granular, tactical, is that we need to be like ruthless about watching the dollars that leave our business. And we start with some very basic approaches. One is like, where is money leaving your business? I mean, do you know? Because a lot of times, the owner or the manager, the GM, they know we're paying bills, but we're not exactly sure how that process is working. So we've got ACH, we've got EFTs, we've got wire transfers, we've got checks that somebody can write, we've got petty cash. Now, what do we have a good process to make sure that when $1 leaves our business, that it's been thoroughly vetted? So the process really is A, where is money leaving your business? And then B, what does that process look like? What sort of approvals do we have? What sort of checks and balances? Simple examples are, are we using purchase orders? We know we're using purchase orders for inventory, sure. Are we using that for material non-inventory items? Usually not. So, and does that align with the budget? And does the department manager even know they have a budget? So it's hard to control costs unless we start with a plan. What do we anticipate spending? So that's going back to the budget, and educating our department managers or those who are authorized to spend money. What's their budget that they can spend to, and then having some sort of purchase order system that ensures a couple things. One, yep, that's in the budget, so this is pretty straightforward. Or two, I've really scrutinized whether the spend makes sense. And when we say that, we're like, A, do we really need to spend this right now? Is there another way to do this? Because often we're like, oh, we need a new X. Well, what if we fixed the thing we already have? Well, no, that would cost more. Okay, but do the numbers on it. Do you have other competitive bids? Because very often we get into the routine of, well, I like this supplier. They've been good to us. We're just going to go with them. Well, they're 20% more than the others. So vetting it, being thoughtful, and treating those it's so hard to get money to come in. We want to make it equally hard for money to go out. So really it comes down to that system. So I see wholesalers using a variety of these. Maybe some use a few steps, some use all the steps. But this is something that's really important to think about, is what is our system for managing the cash expenditures that go out, and really just making sure, because we've got usually a team of people on this. Do we have training around this? Do they have checklists? Do they know what that process should look like? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So we want to kind of understand, plug any leaks in the bucket so we really safeguard that cash.
We got to take you to gross profit management, just because that's what we talk about all the time here. It just makes sense to, for sure. And I'm going to dovetail off of what you said, where it was ruthless about cost existence or cost management. To me, I got a point at our wholesale where I just felt like we couldn't cut anymore. We got pretty lean and pretty efficient. And when I pivoted to focusing on the gross profit top line through the sales, I felt like it actually got easier to expand our top line than it did to force our way through costs.
Yeah.
So do you see other things, or force profitability through costs? And my dad used to be a smart ass of like, you can't cut yourself to profitability. And there was a period of time where I was like, hold my beer and watch this, bro. Mike can attest to that, where we did do that pretty aggressively.
I lived through it.
Yes. He survived his justification of existence, Kary.
And I was our operations manager at that time too. So most of those squeezes were coming directly from my department.
Yep. I'm sorry.
Yep. But when we moved towards the gross profit side, and I started to focus on this element of it through our VXP lens, it became to me like, how are we justifying this? How are we justifying the lack of gross profit in some suppliers, some products, some marketing activities we were doing? Are you seeing anybody focus on that side? Or are you thinking about that through your gross profit management in your company or with your clients as well?
I think more and more, yeah. I mean, when I first started, it was really a foreign concept, if we can believe that. I would talk about gross profit, and the joke was we would do these trainings, and we had our sales manager, and I said, what do you think our gross profit is on our sales? And he kind of looked at the ceiling and he goes, I don't know, it's got to be like 90, 95%. And I was like, okay, we need to talk, we need to look at this. So it's evolved.
How much do we sell that case of beer for? That must be all our profits.
It's all sales, it's all profits. Like, well, actually, no, it's not. So we kind of looked at the details there, but it's definitely more and more on the radar. I think more and more beer wholesalers are really not only embracing we need to understand it and manage it, but B, we need to put tremendous efforts on doing so. And I do agree with you on the cost side. There are a lot of wholesalers that feel like I just don't know. I feel like I've done as much as I can, and so you got to look somewhere else. And that's the beauty of the financial statements. It's like a treasure map of ways that you can improve your business. It's not just cutting expenses. It's improving those gross profits. It's improving your balance sheet. Better management of inventory and so forth. But gross profit for me, the best way that I've found. I heard this line that was kind of interesting. It says, "We are what we focus on." Isn't that interesting? Like if you think about it, we are what we focus on. And so if we just sort of take that human nature and say, well, we know we can make a huge difference in our business if we focus on gross profit. Okay, well, what do we do? What are the reports that we need to run? Who needs to be included in this? Who's making the decisions that are impacting gross profit? And so what we've done, and I've seen other wholesalers do, is create a gross profit team. So it's a team of people, much like you might manage, your sales or whatnot, to really focus on gross profit. Like, okay, what does that mean? What are we selling? Brands, SKUs. What are the sales? What are the prices? What are the costs? What's that structure look like? What are we making money on? And oh my gosh, we're only making that. So it really is sort of seek first to understand, because we don't often look at all the granularity. We're just like, oh, well, we're selling what sells. Whether or not we really understand the gross profit on it. So really educating, creating a team, focusing on the nuts and bolts, and then doing it with some discipline. So some fundamentals, but really bringing that focus. But yes, I do see more and more wholesalers doing that, and that's why I really kind of connect with what you guys are doing, because it's like it's great to have these teams and it's great to focus on them, but you need to incentivize your sales team to achieve that goal as well. Because ultimately, we can sit in a room and talk about what we should or shouldn't, but the team out there is selling based on a different set of incentives. It's hard. So really aligning, everybody's objectives and, putting that emphasis on profit, gross profit, super important.
Kary, you said you are what you focus on. What did you say again? Remind me one more time.
You're right. We are what we focus on.
We are what we focus on. And to me, like that is something that I became attached to at Atlas on accident, and you're saying it in a really elegant way. And I watched it pop up again with a client recently too, in the Midwest part of the country, where they were in a doom loop, is what I would call it, and struggling to find a way to drive a good or a positive sales culture. And they were focused on top line volume. Top line volume is a struggle bus right now. And even if you focus on top line revenue, that could be slightly growing, but it's still struggling, particularly for some of our AB wholesalers as clients as well. It's still kind of struggling to get through. And what we talked about with this client was, hey, we can move the needle on gross profit as a crew. We know that already. You can see it on paper, like you're looking at it and been working with us. Then 60 days, storm clouds are going to part and we're going to get out of this doom loop because we're going to focus on something we can move the needle on. And what's fun to see is that as teams work through what they focus on, they can become a different version of themselves culturally and really move the needle in a positive direction. So, we centrally focus on sales and profitability, but you are what you focus on is a great way to position around, hey, if we were focused on this, like that's what we're going to become. If we're focused on that, that's what we're going to become. And we got to be really cautious about what we're thinking about as leaders as well. It's a fun way that you do a really nice job of weaving in the financial CFO nerd and the human element of making the numbers work the way you want them to work too.
Yeah.
You do a really nice job of that.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
For sure. Now, from a culture side, what else do you see clients doing a really good job around, or what are you working on with clients? Because we spent time around like incentives together. We spent time around compensation together with the last meeting we did together. But that all breeds some kind of culture too of what we're looking for. So where are you seeing in this industry, in this climate right now, clients focusing on culture?
Yeah, I think what we see, if I take one element of culture, and I'll speak from personal experience and then what I've heard from our members, is that it's very easy for us to get into our own silos. And we can think about this in terms of the classic example is drivers and sales. Hatfields and the McCoys, the drivers think the sales team is always trying to screw them. The sales team, this is a sweeping generalization. It's not always like this, but I did experience a fair amount of that. And that can erode culture because we're all sort of like in our own silos. Well, I'm a driver. That person's a salesperson. We're at odds with one another. Not always, but
Well,
certainly
they are
sometimes.
part of
And then
the anti-sales department. That's all the operations team is.
that's true.
Yeah, it's part of the training manual on the operations side.
There has to be that.
Yeah.
It's just ingrained. So we think about, all right. So the first thing again, as I go back to that, seek first to understand, is you've got silos, you've got people. They're all doing different activities, and they tend to kind of birds of a feather type of thing. And then obviously the admin's mad at everybody because the paperwork's never right, and it goes on and on. And then you take it one step further for wholesalers that have multiple locations, as we did at one time. We had 5 different locations. So now you've got silos and silos, and you're like, wow, how are we ever gonna? So for what we saw, the only way to kind of break those silos down was to try to get a respect and understanding of what everybody was doing. And so that does require kind of a lot of thought, like, all right, the driver should run a sales route and vice versa. The person in the office should go out and see how hard it is to work in the warehouse, and the warehouse should sit, with the office person and see, what kind of frustrations arise when the paperwork isn't right and how that makes their job harder. And they've got a family to go home to, but they can't because they're so we're all at our core, we're just human beings trying to make a difference, trying to make a living. And so it's first understanding how these silos can erode the culture and how sort of counterproductive that can be. And I always bring everything back to finance because that's just kind of where my head's always at. And it's really from a ownership standpoint, how inefficient this can be for your organization and how it can really hurt your bottom line, when everybody's pulling in different directions. So the thing that worked best for us was this concept of these weekly financial huddles. So what we would do is we would have a representative from each department, and we would meet on a regular day and a regular time, and we would essentially do a 2-minute drill. So I'd have the sales manager, driver manager, someone from the admin team, someone from warehouse, someone from ownership. So we'd have 6 or 8 people depending, and we would have a very structured agenda as to what people were going to contribute. First, it was about the numbers. Everyone had a number. So going back to the KPIs, we have a top level KPI, cash flow, but that driver has their own number that ties to cash flow, the sales, and so forth. So 2 minutes, we'll go around the table. Sales manager, tell us your number. Well, tell us what's going on in the market. What are you challenged with? Give us some news about what's going on. Very often, like new products that are coming, because this was a consistent thing that new products would come in. The warehouse and the delivery team would be kind of pissed off because, like, where am I supposed to? I have no room to put this. Where am I supposed to put this at the retail? There's no shelf space because you're bringing this stuff in. And so you'd break that down immediately and be like, whoa, 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 whoa. When is it coming? 6 weeks. Where should we put it? Oh, you're supposed to put it here. Okay, good. Completely changed the dynamic and started to break down those. Now, they're still not, always best buddies. But that communication, as simple as it is, but communication done in a fashion where we're exchanging actually legitimate information that's going to help people, do a better job, made a huge difference. So for me, it was first and foremost about the numbers. But then I began to see, oh, no, it's about sharing information, breaking down walls, getting to know each other, and doing it in a setting where there's a lot of mutual respect. And you do need to facilitate that, they kind of watch. We would always say, we're going to take the emotion out of this. This is just about the numbers. Now, that's hard to do, but that was the concept coming in. So culture is a big thing. There's many components. We're human beings. We're tough to figure out, but there's some things that can work. And that's just an example of something that, I've experienced and obviously heard from a lot of our members in terms of what's going on and what we can do about it.
I love that. That's great advice. And being on both sides of that front line, right? Being on the operations side and then also being on the sales management side, I understand that battle completely. And like I said earlier, I mean, when on the operations side, you show up, are you ready for battle? Because it's always fighting against sales, right? And on the sales team, you're always fighting against operations because you're right. I mean, sales team's excited about bringing in this new product. Everybody's excited to bring in, the new, what's hot. But then the operations team, warehouse team, where am I going to put this? I'm running out of room. What do you guys? You guys even think about this? So bringing them all together under one roof in one room, and you're right. I mean, just open dialogue, right? Just open conversation. Hey, let's come up with a plan. We're going to give you some time to think about it and plan for it. That's wonderful. But how would listeners or anybody that's on right now listening get in contact with you, Kary?
Get in contact with me. Yeah, easiest way is email. It's Kary at beerbusinessfinance.com. It's Kary, very unique spelling, of course, at beerbusinessfinance.com. Feel free to call or text as well. I got an open line, 603-313-2322. And Bud's got the website up there, so there's contact information. What I'm trying to do is really put a lot of free stuff out there too. So as you can see, we have free white papers, PDFs, how to reduce out of code, SKU rationalization, how to build your sales plan, how to educate your team in terms of financial literacy, understanding the most important numbers. We've got the free newsletter there, so it just kind of pops into your email each week with a different topic. So yeah, I would start with this. Just check out the blogs, download the white papers, and see if it helps you get where you want to get financially.
Thank you.
Hey,
yeah, that's great.
Thanks, Kary, for joining us today, my man. Great episode. Always love working with you. Hopefully we can continue to do some more and more work in the future with our clients together.
Absolutely. You can count on it. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me.
You rock. Cheers.
Thanks, Kary.